What means more, words or deeds? You've seen some mixed messaging from Pope Leo XIV about a variety of things. I cover these days largely the negative on this channel because you're going to get the positive if you spend 2 minutes on social media. But here he said something that was an applause line for some reason. A Facebook page called Trad West posted this. I have no ill will against Trad West. I follow them. I like their content. He posted a picture with Pope Leo said, "We will not ordain women." Well done. Congratulations. That's what we call Catholicism 101 on the sacraments. To which I said, the bar is so low right now that a simple statement like that is an applause line that is based. And people agreed with me, getting about how, there's a lot of fatigue now going on with seeing, your friend posting on Facebook or X about, he said a Pater Noster in Latin, where he offered a reverent ordinary form mass. Newsflash, Francis, his predecessor, offered reverent Novus Ordo masses ad orientem in St. Peter's all the time, at least when he was offering the mass before his health made it impossible for him to publicly offer a mass anymore. You might take a little umbrage with the idea that he offered those masses, but you go look it up. He offered ad orientem masses all the time. He wasn't doing it in Latin, but they were more reverent than most masses most Catholics ever go to. They were ad orientem, though, because the altars he was offering those masses on were built for it. There was literally no other way to offer the mass there. And with Leo, he has great optics. I will never condemn him for that. He dresses like a post-conciliar pope, as your expectations are. He is soft-spoken, charity in his voice, all the rest. He has wonderful optics. And I almost wonder if that was part of the reason that there was so much adulation on the side of James Martin, because the optics can make it easier to swallow the bad medicine. And what is the bad medicine? Well, John Henry Weston posted this. He posted this to X. Pretty sure he posted it to Facebook. New reports say Pope Leo XIV to appoint ultra-progressive Vienna apostolic administrator. That is typically a bishop who has the authority to run a diocese that currently doesn't have a bishop. This apostolic administrator who wants women's ordination as the new Archbishop of Vienna. Quoting the bishop, "In my opinion, it's time to initiate changes on the two issues of women in the church and celibacy." In other words, we just throw out everything the church has taught for the minimum the last 1,000 years. And actually, celibacy in the clergy goes back to way before 1,000 years ago. Just married priests in the Latin Rite were tolerated for a variety of reasons, but a practice was put to an end that long ago. And celibacy of the priesthood is now the capital T tradition of the West. You don't just throw it out. Throwing that out would be akin to throwing out the married clergy in the East. It's been so long, it's part of their capital T tradition. Now, you might be wondering what he's talking about here. So we're going to go over a couple of articles here, because this bishop is going to be looks like it's going to be the new Archbishop of Vienna. I learned of this, the more full story, from summorum.pontificum.de. They're a traditional Catholic news blog run out of Germany. Their headline is Josef Grünwidl becomes the new Archbishop of Vienna. At least that's what today's press releases, for example, here suggest. And we assume that's exactly what will happen. Now we're going to, he says, and since Pope Leo is a man who values traditional forms, the new Archbishop will surely soon be elevated to the rank of Cardinal. Grünwidl is 62 years old, so the Viennese can look forward to a long journey together. So if he's going to be the Archbishop and then a Cardinal, he could be there till he's 80 years old, basically for what will look like most of Leo's pontificate, if people's expectations are correct. And you're like, well, this isn't real. This is just, rumors, right? Well, Katholisch.de, the official news arm of the German Bishops' Conference, headline, media reports, new Archbishop of Vienna appointed. The bishops of Germany think this is real. This is their official news page. This is when they publish something, this is their endorsement, whether it's an advocacy pieces for radically changing the church or for crushing traditionalists. When they post something, it's their voice. unless it's the rare occasion where they put a disclaimer. No disclaimer here. So we'll go over the German bishop's news piece, and then we'll go back to that some more in Pontificum article. The current apostolic administrator of the Archdiocese of Vienna, Josef Grünwidl, is to become the new Archbishop of the Austrian capital's diocese, according to consistent media reports. On Wednesday, Der Standard reported, among other things, that government sources had confirmed that 62-year-old Grünwidl would succeed Cardinal Christoph Schönborn, who retired in January for reasons of age. This Thursday, the newspaper reported, citing the Austrian press agency, that the Council of Ministers will approve the new bishop in a circular resolution. However, there has been no official confirmation of the appointment yet. The Archdiocese of Vienna stated on its website on Thursday, quote, several media outlets are currently reporting that the official appointment of the new Archbishop of Vienna is imminent, and the Pope's choice is likely fallen on our administrator, Josef Grünwidl. Since episcopal appointments are subject to a confidential process that is only concluded with an official announcement by the Vatican, the Archdiocese of Vienna cannot comment on ongoing proceedings. The decision rests with the Pope until the very end. The appointment was also not listed in the daily announcement to the Holy See press office, the so-called Bollettino, on Thursday. That doesn't actually matter much. They can release that news on a dime. Now, okay, so what's so bad about this guy? Well, I already told you. He's a big fan of the Women's Ordination Conference. And here they say that Grünwidl is not shy. He has clearly stated that mandatory celibacy should be abolished, that women could join the College of Cardinals, meaning they get to vote for not only for Pope, but in theory, one of them could become a popette. And that the church must enter into dialogue about the ordination of women. This means the apostolic faith is outdated and must be rethought by the next synod. This is the current model bishop, a smiling reformer who dismantles the priesthood with a tone of pious sensitivity. When the hierarchy calls for a new council to clarify what Christ has already defined, we are witnessing open rebellion being canonized as a virtue. Now, they cited Mr. Chris Jackson. I covered his breaking news piece about the celebration of Pope Leo of an absolute monster. By the way, for those who care, I spoke to him about his sources and things, and he has a lot more sources, including the actual books they were published in. He actually has citations for them, articles in Italian that were not just the one German article that the few reports about this talked about. And he has the citations with extra long, even worse quotes. So it's real. The reason that this wasn't widely reported outside of Italy is because those sources came from books of his that are kind of hard to get and locked into archive libraries, physical libraries in Italy. But certain researchers got access to them, went through his books, and published articles a long, long, long time ago. They're out there. But I have the citations, and I trust his integrity that he wasn't just making something up, because there's no reason to do so. Now, you might think that, you might go, well, that's interesting, and then you'll see a meme he's posting here, because he does have hot takes. This is why certain high-profile traditional commentators don't like him. And on the issue of Pope Leo appointing this new monster to be the Archbishop and then future Cardinal of Vienna, he has this headline: "The Art of Losing Quietly. Supich ascends, Opus Dei collapses, Vienna applauds women's ordination, and the keepers of the peace keep their mouths shut." This is, of course, a dig at a group he calls Trad Inc., which are essentially the most mainstream, most recognized voices in the traditional recognize and resist and very conservative, not quite recognize and resist traditionalist movement. He posted this with a Star Wars meme. If you're familiar with the movie, you'll remember the character of, this wasn't Porkins, but this was their, like, the Death Star assault squad pilot leader, saying "almost there" to the Latin Novus Ordo Indult, because they are clearly, Rome is going to replace your traditional Mass temporarily with the Latin Novus Ordo Indult Mass. Basically, the new form of the Mass offered in Latin. And your response to that might be, well, they don't need an indult to say that. Don't worry. They have said in their letters that they don't want accretions to the traditional Mass. Meaning, stuff from the traditional Mass brought into the new Mass. You know, too much of that Gregorian chant stuff and other stuff that conciliar documents technically say you're supposed to have in the Mass. Of course, he needs to say that they keep zipping it. You may not like the meme, but that's kind of what he's going off of here. We'll just skip down here to the Vienna heretic. And boy, is that a picture that just screams synodality. The Vienna heretic, Although they're all heretics, the one section this is referring to is the second from the right. So the hymn, as opposed to this lady play acting as a priest, another lady play acting as a priest, and what can only be Protestant ministers and then this guy who is either an extra from a Harry Potter movie or a stonecutter. I don't know which. It says, if reports are true, the next Archbishop of Vienna will be Josef Grünwidl, a man who publicly supports the ordination of women and wants a new council to make it happen. Council, not synod, council. In ecumenical council. A nightmare scenario with this crop of bishops. In saner times, that would earn him defrocking. In Leo's church, it earns him promotion. Grünwidl isn't coy. He has said plainly that mandatory celibacy should end, that women could join the College of Cardinals, and the church must enter a dialogue on female ordination. Now do some math here. Women joining the College of Cardinals plus dialogue on female ordination leads to women's ordination. So what does that mean? Do your math. 1 + 1 = female pope. That's what it means. Translation, the apostolic faith is outdated and must be reimagined by the next synod. This is the model bishop now, a smiling reformer who dismantles the priesthood with a tone of prayerful sensitivity. When the hierarchy starts demanding a new council to clarify what Christ already defined, we're watching open rebellion canonized as virtue. And I cannot say it better myself, hence why I reported on it. So now we go to a little more. For the tone police, you'll like this reporting a little bit better. Kath Khan, who, by the way, also verified what Chris Jackson said in his report by going to some of the sources. And they have an entirely different article that doesn't even cite him, but they covered the same story right after he did. Links in the description, or links will not be in the description box. It'll be at the Substack, which is in the link to that in the description box, or the soon-to-be eliminated returntotradition.org. No, that does not mean the podcast is ending, or this channel, or anything else. Just the website that costs me more money than it's worth to run every year, simply because hardly anybody uses it. More people go to the Substack. And Substack is just a blog system basically set up like a Twitter feed. You go there, you have a feed, all the people you're following, get a short excerpt for what they've posted, and then you can click on it, and boom, there's the full article. Wonderful system, much better, much more user-friendly. Now, you'll notice CathCon noticed this problem back in August. Headline, ultra-progressive Vienna apostolic administrator who wants a new council denies unconvincingly he wants to be archbishop. In my opinion, it's time to initiate changes on the two issues of women in the church and celibacy. Long wait for new bishop, nothing unusual, he says. And I hope he's right on that score. So Leo, I don't know, my wildest dream sends Bishop Schneider from Kazakhstan to there to be the new bishop, then archbishop, then cardinal. That's not going to happen. I will eat my hat if I had one, if he did. The apostolic administrator of the Archdiocese of Vienna, Josef Grünwidl, has asked for understanding for the long wait for a new Archbishop of Vienna. While he also wonders why it's taking so long, he also says it's important that a good bishop is found. If that apparently takes longer, then I can live with that, he said on Thursday back in August to a media outlet. Moreover, such waiting periods are nothing unusual. After Cardinal Franz Koenig's retirement, it took about a year to appoint a successor. In the Diocese of Innsbruck, they waited almost 2 years for a new bishop. Grünwidl also reiterated that he expects a new archbishop to be appointed by the end of the year. An appointment during the next meeting of cardinals after the summer break in mid-September is also conceivable. His mandate would expire in January. Exceeding this deadline would result in an expansion of the administrator's powers, something Rome apparently wants to avoid, and with good reason. When asked whether he would stick to his no if he were appointed, Grünwidl said, "I've clearly stated that I do not see myself in this position. Should the Pope nevertheless decide to do so, I will see how I react." Overall, the Viennese administrator sees the Catholic Church in Austria, but also throughout Western Europe, quote, in a major transformation process that is proceeding rapidly. In addition to demographic change with declining birth rates, there is a completely changed religious landscape in which churches are, quote, just one option among many. This pluralization of options is positive in principle, according to this archbishop, but the church is still struggling with this new situation at the end of a Christian Catholic monoculture. In other words, the church had enjoyed living in a place, at least in Vienna, in Austria, of all but a Christian monoculture, a Catholic monoculture, meaning Catholicism was the main option. It dominated everything. And now that's not the case anymore. Probably because a lot of those new arrivals to Europe that you're not allowed to critique too harshly on places like where we're having this conversation. He says, we don't want to reinvent anything. After all, the gospel is the best message, which is about peace, reconciliation, community, and hope. And that is what we need today. If we proclaimed it more credibly and authentically, apparently the church doesn't authentically proclaim the gospel, we would also have a better chance of reaching people with our message. Many parishes and communities are already doing well in this, but there's still room for improvement, he admitted. The time is also ripe for changes in the areas of women's issues and celibacy, the administrator continued. While some things have already been set in motion, Grünwidl pointed to the synodal process initiated by Pope Francis. Much remains to be done. In my opinion, it's time to initiate changes on the two issues of women in the church and celibacy. The celibate lifestyle for priests has always existed and will continue to exist, but voluntary, not mandatory. That would be my approach, end quote. And for those who agree with him on that, the biggest opponents to the ending of priestly celibacy are oftentimes those weird, I say weird because they're, maybe unusual is a better word, because most Catholic priests in the West are celibate, unmarried men, 99.9% of them. But there are a handful who, in the Anglican ordinariate or former Lutheran pastors or that kind of thing, who are married. And they're oftentimes the biggest proponents of not ending clerical celibacy. And many priests who are actually very traditional and conservative in their bearing point out to you that the obvious problem there is. You'll have a priest with essentially divided loyalties. Not to mention your daily masses will just go away. They will. Go look to the Eastern Rites if you don't believe me. And the reason that is because there's a tradition, pretty hard one that the saints have spoken on in kind of in a roundabout way, that before Mass can be offered, the priest and apparently the permanent deacon also need to, for 24 hours, refrain from engaging in certain marital activities. If you have a daily Mass where that priest is offering 5 days a week, he will not be able to fulfill his marital duties. Simple as that. Now you might think, well, the church should change that rule. And therein lies the problem. We got into this mess because we kept changing the rules and pretending we were going back to some ancient tradition when the writings of the saints, the church fathers, are full of defenses of clerical celibacy. And no, modern times, because of the McCarrick problem, do not demand that we change things again. That's how we got into this mess. Now, for those who are curious, in light of yesterday's bombshell video I did, Catholic Conclave reported papal idolization of a McCarrick-type priest started by Francis continues. This is their report on it. They start with a quote on things. Here's where they get into it. They say, unfortunately, Don Lorenzo Milani can only be described as an utterly despicable character, as can be seen from an article from 2018 translated below. Francis was, from his comment, clearly aware of this, but still preferred him to the Holy Curie of Ars as a model for priests. Here they're referring to the fact that Benedict XVI tried to essentially elevate St. John Vianney even more. And he met fierce competition or fierce resistance from that among the bishops and cardinals. And the reason is if you've ever read what St. John Vianney had to say, he was a very rigid priest. He was a clericalist, a neo-Pharisee, to use Francis's language. Read his homilies sometimes. He's got a homily, a famous one about what happens if you dance at parties. Okay. He's too rigid for on most things, even for most contemporary traditional Catholics. That's why he didn't become become the model for priests, even though he's always been kind of called that. Instead, this is the priest who's the model for priests today. Pope Benedict XVI sought to make St. John Marie Vianney the patron saint of priests during the Year of Priests back in 2019 or 2010, but his attempt failed due to fierce opposition from progressive church circles, including Cardinal Claudio Humes, then prefect for the Congregation of the Clergy. And then he goes on to the priest we're talking about here's track record. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this, it wasn't just a German article that posted this stuff. Mr. Jackson found more evidence from other articles that have been lost to the sands of time, basically. Books locked away in libraries that are cited in those articles. I hope he does a follow-up article, because the pushback he's getting is pretty hard, which is to be expected given the accusation, which is that Pope Leo knowingly celebrated a monster priest, a priest who was just as bad as Ted McCarrick, or worse, because at least Ted McCarrick kept what he was doing under wraps. For the most part, people found out. But this priest wrote grotesque lines in his diaries and in his books that would have been too much for Cardinal Tuco Fernandez, which is an astonishing thing for me to have to tell you. That is the state of things in the Church of the New Advent today. Now, I'm going to shift here. Let's ask you if what you're about to hear sounds like a good assessment of the state of the church today. There's a group of priests you might recall, the Transalpine Redemptorists. I've covered them off and on for the last 2 years. They've gotten into a lot of trouble because they were traditional Catholics, defending the faith, and saying some pretty harsh things about Vatican II and all the usual things the harder line traditionalists have to say. But these are men's religious. As a consequence of this, they got canceled, basically, got kicked out of New Zealand, and it looks like their status in the future might be up for grabs. Don't be shocked if Rome crushes them. I have no reason to think that'll stop under Leo. But they issued a pointed public letter and then signed their names to it. And they have things to say that are going to be hard for some people to hear. But here's the letter. It was sent to me by a viewer. I saw it posted all over social media late yesterday. Note their letterhead: Congregation of the Sons of the Most Holy Redeemer, Transalpine Redemptorists. Open letter to Catholic bishops, priests, religious, and faithful from the General Chapter of the Congregation of the Sons of the Most Holy Redeemer, being held in Papastranze, Scotland, which is where they're from, St. Therese of the Child Jesus, 3rd October. And then given the 16th of October public date. I'll try to make this a little bit bigger so you can, for those of you following along at home, you can read it with me. Dear faithful, live Jesus our love and Mary our hope. It is with a heavy heart and great sadness that we write to you. What unites us is our great love for our Holy Mother, the Catholic Church, and bride of Jesus Christ, for whom the martyrs shed their blood and the saints gave their lives. It is this love that forces us to express a truth that is difficult, however essential. See Luke chapter 12, verses 4-9. Just like you, we too have cherished great hope for many years. We believed it was possible to live as faithful children of the tradition within the structures of the modern church. And I'll pause here. By structures, they mean in a regular state of communion. We believed that the old and beautiful traditions of our faith, in particular, the Latin Mass of all times, would be rightly returned to us. This gave us hope, especially during the time of Benedict XVI. We confidently expected that we would be able to freely practice the faith of our fathers in the church. We didn't know how wrong we were. Through years of trials and experience, we have come to the unfortunate conclusion that the traditional Catholic faith, the faith of all times and of the saints, is incompatible with the new modern church, the fruit of the Second Vatican Council. They simply cannot coexist in one body. As an aside here, they are answering the question that I've been rhetorically asking people for the last year or so. Given that they have changed the church and are pushing it even harder with their synod on synodality, it looks like we're approaching the dawn of the ape of the church of Catholic prophecy, where numerous mystics, endorsed by Fulton Sheen, who coined the term ape of the church. He clearly had read them, practically quoted them, but they basically all said that what would happen is you would have two institutions coexisting in the same space. The Catholic Church and then a false ape, the false mimic, if you will. The institution that everybody assumed was the Catholic Church, but really wasn't. And that behind that false mimic would be the true Catholic Church. But the modernists who were in charge would dismantle the Catholic Church. They would try. They would think that they would be on the cusp of victory when God would have enough of their games and stop them. Common through line in Catholic prophecy. I've covered it extensively for the last most of a decade on this channel. Here they say, these monks say, the Catholic Church and the ape of the church cannot coexist in one body. Let's continue with what they say. Since we deeply cherish and honor the traditional Latin Mass and cannot give up the Holy Mass of the centuries and of the saints, this new church does not want us. Because of our fidelity, we have been considered stubborn, difficult, and rebellious, stitched up and lied about in never-ending acrimony. This letter appeals to all who sense that something is tremendously wrong in the church, or who think that the new church and the unchanging faith can peacefully coexist. Alas, allow us to state the sad truth that our experience clearly shows this to be impossible. Surely this new church would shock all the holy popes who declared time and again that religious indifferentism is a very great evil, absolutely incompatible with the Catholic faith. And I'll interject here. Religious indifferentism is essentially the attitude that, to some degree, we've all adopted, especially if you live in a pluralistic country like the United States, where we all tolerate people who have different religions. The problem is the institutional church has as well, to the point where we get ecumenical dialogue. And I call it ecumenical dialogue because they have gone from merely peaceful coexistence with peaceful dialogue about the truth of Jesus Christ, which had kind of been the church's stance since essentially the 18th century post-Reformation period, but they would still preach the gospel and bring souls to Christ, even in Protestant countries, once the Catholic Church was able to operate freely in them again. They went from that, defending the truth of the faith through means necessary for their times, to religious indifferentism, where you hear weird things like the Ottoman religion, the crescent moon worshippers, again, another group you can't critique here on this platform, these deniers of the Holy Trinity, and who say they greatly honor Jesus Christ by demoting him, turning him into merely a prophet, one among many, the highest other than their false prophet, their warlord they worship. They deny his divinity. Somehow we still worship the same God as them. No, we don't. Their understanding of the Father clearly means it's not the same God the Father that Catholics and Protestants worship, and other groups as well. You've seen these ecumenical conferences in the Vatican, including pagan worshipers. Go back to the Assisi conferences in 1988, where the Pope stood there and watched idolatry happen on the altar. It's not a new problem, but in the grand history of the church, it is a new problem, because the 60 years we've been suffering under this madness is but a blip on the radar in the grand history of the church. Surely, they say, this new church would shock all the holy popes who declared time and again that religious indifferentism is a very great evil, absolutely incompatible with the Catholic faith. We tell you, we will not be complicit by silence in this ongoing destruction of the church. We must speak up at some time, and what better time than now? After 17 years as a community within the structures of the church, we've been continually isolated and harassed. More especially these last years, the bishops of Christ Church has made us to be as the offscouring or scum of the earth. By his numerous decrees and recourse to Rome, he has sought to expel our monks from the diocese. He wants to have 15 local vocations perpetually exiled from their families and homeland. We tell you now, higher duty forbids it. So long as there are but one soul that asks us for the holy sacrifice of the Mass, the sacraments, or spiritual help, with God's grace, we will not desert it. The Good Shepherd urges us to lay down our lives for his sheep, keep the hungry wolf at bay. It is our duty in charity, in theology, and by canon law. Why? Because the chain of command has been broken. Authority in the church is ministerial, serving our Lord, not absolute, doing whatever it likes. It binds us because it is itself bound to Christ, to the deposit of the faith, to the constant magisterium. When a superior departs from his own obedience to Christ the King, his command is no longer the arm of Christ, but the gesture of a man. And they have a citation there to Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologia. These churchmen disobey God, and then, having shattered the chain of God's command, they attempt to invoke religious obedience for matters that deplete the church and take away the Holy Mass. Toia missum, toia ecclesiam. Take away the Mass, you destroy the church. Quotation to Luther. No, we must obey God before man, and therefore, cleaving with might and main to our deep communion with Holy Mother Church, our duty before our Lord Jesus Christ and towards souls demands that 1. We repudiate Amoris Laetitia, permitting Holy Communion to couples living in sin. 2. We repudiate Traditionalist Custodes, persecution of the Mass in Catholics. 3. We repudiate fiducia supplicants, permitting the blessings of James Martin-type couples. 4. We repudiate the document on human fraternity, stating that God wills all religions. 5. We repudiate the false theology of sister churches and partial communion. 6. We repudiate the false shepherds who triumphantly processed the Pachamama idol in St. Peter's. 7. Repudiate Francis apologizing for their heroic Catholic who threw that idol into the Tiber. 8. We repudiate the scourge of religious indifference in New Zealand and throughout the church. 9. We repudiate the New Zealand bishop's acts of closing churches and denying the sacraments in cowardly submission to the response to the COVID. We repudiate, number 10, the Bishop of Christ Church receiving his ashes on Ash Wednesday from the Anglican Bishop of Christ Church. 11. We repudiate the corruption of children and scandal given to the innocent through evil catechetical programs. 12. We repudiate Francis' teaching that all religions are as different languages and asking, is my God more important than yours? 13. We repudiate the silence of those bishops who failed to speak out against that betrayal of the faith. 14. We repudiate the synodal church as distinct from the divinely constituted Catholic Church, meaning they reject that the synodal church and the Catholic Church are the same. 14, I think. We repudiate the ongoing destruction and humiliation of our Holy Mother, the Church. And 15. We repudiate those who attack or undermine the Church and her dogma, morals, sacraments, or discipline with a new secretive, that's another word you can't use on this platform I found, of man. To all who read this, how long will this nonsense go on? Whatever may be the cost to us, the apostle, we must say, anathema. Quoting St. Paul, but though we or an angel from heaven preach a gospel to you besides that which we have preached to you, let him be anathema. As we have said before, so now I say again, if anyone preach to you a gospel besides that which you have received, let him be anathema. See the letter to the Galatians, chapter 1, verses 8 to 9. Do not remain silent. Defend the faith of our fathers. Although all nations obey King Antiochus so as to depart every man from the law of his father and consent to his commandments, I and my sons and my brethren will obey the law of our fathers. See 1 Maccabees chapter 2, verses 19 to 20. On the contrary, it is written in Acts chapter 5, verse 29, we ought to obey God rather than men. Now sometimes the things commanded by a superior are against God. Therefore superiors are not to be obeyed in all things. See St. Thomas Aquinas in the Summa. Expected dominum virilite age et confraterit cor tuum. My apologies for my terrible Latin. Expect the Lord, do manfully, and let their heart take courage. See Psalm 26, verse 14. Gaude Maria Virgo, rejoice, O Virgin Mary, thou alone hast crushed all heresies in the whole world. And then signed personally, as you can see, for those watching on YouTube or another video service, the entire order of their monks. It's worth noting here, they keep throwing things in here. Do manfully was the most obvious one. And do not remain silent. You know, and then this from Maccabees. Although all nations obey King Antiochus so as to depart every man from the law of his father and consent to his commandments, I and my sons and my brethren will obey the law of the fathers. You know, I cannot help but be reminded that there are voices right now with major media platforms in the traditional movement who have told people to shut up in hope that we be given our traditional masses back in exchange for essentially keeping silent about the evils happening in the church and to the church. And some of us can't make that deal. It's a deal with the devil, essentially. And those bishops or those monks sound like they're calling out that entire attitude. Do not be silent, be manful. Imagine if we had just one order of monks that masculine, we're talking monks here, that masculine in a Catholic sense, wanting to gird their loins. Imagine if we had that in just one in every small country and one in every region of every large country. Imagine how fundamentally different life would be. These are the prayer warriors of the church, men who spend their days, and nuns like them, spend their days praying for us and working. Ora et labora. Work and prayer, prayer and work. Chesterton, in his famous Lepanto poem, if you've never read it, if you're not a poem reader type, Christopher Check, I think it is, from, I think he's now with Catholic Answers. He has, from several years ago, a poem or a reading of the poem, and he does it in a very dramatic way. And the reason it has to be read in a dramatic way is, as he himself describes, it practically gallops when you listen to it. In that poem, Chesterton described them not only as the prayer warriors, but they were essentially so important that those same Ottomans went out of their way to scour the deserts when they would take new territory that was Christian and hunt down all the monks and make them not their problem anymore, because the followers of their false prophet knew exactly what they were capable of. I stand with those bishops. I hope you do too. And the only way I can really stand with them, because I don't have any way, I don't know how to donate to them. They don't make that clear. If somebody from the Transalpine Redemptorists sees this and you can verify your identity and there's a way to donate to you, I will happily publicize it. The best we can do, and I think they would be happy with this, is pray for them, that they have, first and foremost, of course, the clarity to align what they're doing with the will of God. Always, especially when you're taking something as drastic a step as saying, the synodal church is not the Catholic Church. A lot of implications there. Very kind of Lefebvrean implications. And no, I don't think Archbishop Lefebvre was in schism, no matter what some maniacs in Rome thought at the time. But pray for them, that they may have the courage to align themselves with the will of God and have the ability, the fortitude to follow through. I'm curious what you think in the comments. So just let me know in the comments what you think. And pray for the church and pray for everybody we spoke about. And otherwise, let me know generally what it is that you think is the proper response. As Laura says, we need strong male leaders like Bishop Strickland and Bishop Schneider, I think she's saying. Generally, Schneider is being careful, but for those of you who don't think Schneider is that brave, within 2 weeks or so of Pope Leo becoming Pope Leo, Schneider was already calling him out. Schneider's not a rad trad. He might be the favorite bishop for traditional Catholics that aren't, looking to his name escapes me now. There's a famous bishop among the Sedevacantists that some Sedevacantists or Sedevacantist leaning Catholics say, well, where is this guy wrong? He leads one of the largest Sedevacantist groups. I don't have any issue with the bishop or Sedevacantists per se. Individual Sedevacantists, sure, many issues, but most of them, no, they're Catholic. I don't agree with their conclusions. And he's not, Bishop Fillet, right? But Schneider has the faith. And he, while others are remaining silent, stepped forward and started pointing out problems 2 to 3 weeks into the new papacy. I covered that when it happened. It was shocking for many people. Ryan Bannister commenting on a debate going on in the live chat. Please keep such debates respectful of each other, please. Vigano is justified in what he said. Bergoglian was an error to claim excommunication. Yes, Vigano's excommunication was erroneous as well. And I don't agree with everything Vigano said, especially on geopolitics. But he's not wrong about what's happening in the church. Laura says, when I see the strong bishop, they give me hope and they are future saints of our times. Well, these are monks. But yes, I know, I get what you mean. There are still people who have in positions in the church, formal positions of some kind in the institutional church, who are brave, who are willing to see and call things are what they are. Let me know. Seamus says, thoughts lead to words and deeds. Yes. Sometimes, though, things never get past words. And this is why I asked this question on X the other day. And I asked it again before this broadcast. Do the SSPX have the fortitude to do what is necessary? Time is no longer on their side. Yes, I generally leave the timetable up to them. There have been whispers about getting new bishops for years. Reportedly, Francis agreed to let them have new bishops. And I think the question had gotten down to Rome approving their candidates. And I understand why they wanted Rome to approve it. Most people, I think, do. But we may be approaching a time where they just stall on approving the candidates, leaving the SSPX in the position of having to do what Archbishop Lefebvre did again, because Archbishop Lefebvre kind of ran into the same problem. He got strung along for a decade by Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger. Yes, that Ratzinger, Benedict XVI, for a decade on bishops for the SSPX. They need new bishops. They had 4. One got excommunicated. I do kind of take that one with a grain of salt too, but he passed away recently. Last year, one of probably their brightest intellectual mind passed away, leaving them with 2. These were men who were consecrated in 1988. It's been almost 40 years. I do hope they act soon. They have the fortitude to do it. But let me know what you, as John Gillen says, Rome will try to run out the clock. That is my fear, because that has been what they've been trying to do since the 1970s with the SSPX. The SSPX actually got official permission from the Vatican back in like the 70s to do what they were doing. And then they tried to rescind it because they took one look at what was happening at the seminary and was like, oh, these are Catholic priests. Can't have that. All right, folks. Thanks very much for tuning in today. Please pray for everybody we spoke about negatively today. Take any anger you get from these kinds of stories and use it positively. And prayer and fasting for their souls is the best way to respond. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.